In our critique of the SAC system of hermeneutics, we say that the SAC's overarching principle of Srila Prabhupada first contradicts the Vedic principle of revealed scriptures as primary evidence. What does the SAC actually say about this? So here's their overarching principle, which they also call the bedrock of their system. On page 21, they introduce it. They say, overarching principle, understanding tradition through Srila Prabhupada, accepting Srila Prabhupada as the representative and conveyor of the essence of the tradition and parampara in the most appropriate way for our understanding and application. And on page 24, as part of their explanation, they make this clarification. Quote, for ISKCON members, Srila Prabhupada, his words and example, is the lens through which we understand the previous acharyas, the Gaudiya Sampradaya, and the whole Vedic literature. We do not, quote, jump over Srila Prabhupada. We privilege Srila Prabhupada's vision and explanation over those of others. According to them, this means Srila Prabhupada first, before all other evidence. They actually use that term, Srila Prabhupada first. That's on page 32. Although the SAC does admit the validity of Shastras and Acharyas, of course they admit it, Srila Prabhupada is their primary evidence. So we dispute this. We say that Srila Prabhupada as evidence or praman is absolutely necessary, but nevertheless he is not our primary evidence. That is because all the bona fide acharyas, all the sampradayas teach that Shastra is primary. And Srila Prabhupada himself said that Shastra is primary, not Guru, not previous acharyas. Now, some devotees have raised this objection. They say, Srila Prabhupada is a perfect person who cannot commit any mistake. And his statements are as good as Shastra. If he had not explained Dharma and Bhakti to us, we would not have known anything about Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vedas, and any other scripture for that matter. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada is our primary pramana. So these devotees use inference to reach their conclusion. It's like this. Here's the classic example. Because we see smoke on the mountain, there must be fire in the mountain. Similarly, these devotees say that because we see that Srila Prabhupada cannot commit any mistake, and he is very learned, and also because we would not know anything about Shastra if it were not for him. Therefore, he is our primary evidence. The SAC thus says, Srila Prabhupada first. The SAC uses inference to reach the conclusion that Srila Prabhupada is our primary praman. But relying on inference to support this conclusion is a mistake. Why is relying on inference a mistake? The reason is it is subject to human error. The Sanskrit word for inference is anuman, which literally means follows from the mind. So anu means to follow, and the mind man. When we see smoke on the mountain, our mind recalls the properties of smoke and its association with fire. And then from this we conclude that there must be fire in the mountain. So anuman is knowledge that arises after contact with the mind. And because the mind is associated with a person who is conditioned by the 4 defects of material life, inference itself is a defective pramana. Only Shabda, or scriptural testimony, or Shastra, is free from the 4 defects of conditioned life. That is the only evidence that is 100% reliable, and that is the evidence that the SAC should have used to support its overarching principle, but did not. So at this point, the SAC will say, but we did quote Shastra to support our overarching principle. But the SAC only partially quoted Shastra, not fully. They quoted it to support only some parts of their argument, but not others. And in particular, they did not support it. They did not quote Shastra to support their conclusion. Here's the SAC's mistake. It's just like quoting the Vedic injunction that the stool of an animal is impure, and then we say that because the cow is an animal, the stool of a cow is also impure. But that's not correct. And the reason it's not correct is because there is a Vedic injunction that says the stool of the cow is pure. So we have to accept that. So the inference, using inference, partially quoting a Vedic injunction and then using inference is wrong. The conclusion by that way is wrong because it contradicts a Vedic injunction that says otherwise. What part did the SAC actually support with Shastra? So the SAC used Shastras to support their premise that one cannot understand the Shastras or the previous acharyas except through one's guru. This is actually acceptable. So here's a sample of the statements they selected. Acharyavan Purusho Veda. One who approaches a bona fide spiritual master can understand everything about spiritual realization. And the next one they quote, only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. Another one, Acharyavan Purusho Veda. Simply by speculating, by so-called scholarship, it is not possible. It is not possible. One must approach the Acharya. And on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's appearance day, if anyone wants to understand Krishna jumping over the spiritual master, then immediately he becomes bogus. Therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Guru Krishna Kripaya Paya Bhakti Lata Bija. That is a Vedic injunction. Tadvidi pranipatina pariprashnena sevaya. Nobody can understand Krishna without going through his most confidential servant. Another one. You cannot imagine what my spiritual master said, or even if you read some books, you cannot understand unless you understand it from me. This is called parampara system. You cannot jump over the superior guru. As we can see, the SAC wanted to demonstrate that understanding Shastra or other acharyas has to be through one's guru, not independently. One is not allowed to jump over the previous acharya, and that's correct. We agree with that. However, just as it is a mistake to conclude that the stool of a cow is impure because there's a Vedic injunction that says the stool of an animal is impure, it is a mistake to infer from the SAC's evidence that Srila Prabhupada is our primary evidence. This is because there are Vedic injunctions that say that the revealed scriptures or Shastra are first before all other evidences, including the Acharya. Here are some of those evidences here. Manu Samhita and Yajnavalkya Smriti declare that the Vedas are the root pramana, or primary evidence. From Manu Samhita, Vedo kilo dharmamulam smrti shile chatadvidam acharash chaiva sadhunam atmanastushtirevacha. The entire Veda is the root source of Dharma. Also, the conscientious recollection of the righteous persons versed in the Veda, the practice of good and learned men, and their self-satisfaction. Yajnavalkya says, also similarly, he says, the Shruti, the Smriti, the conduct of good men, what appears pleasant to one's own self, and the desire which springs from a good resolution are said to be the roots of Dharma. Just one quick note, the statements like what appears to be pleasant to one's good self, that only applies to thoroughly learned men who are exemplary in the character. If you're just a rascal and it appears good to yourself, that's not a source of Dharma. Nonetheless, Manu especially, he makes the point, Vedo kilo dharma mulam, that the root is the Vedas. And Srila Prabhupada himself also says this, more or less the same thing. He says in his purport to Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 20, text 352, he says, Srila Narottama Das Thakur says, Saru Shastra Guru Vakya Chitte Te Kariya Aikya. One should accept a thing as genuine by studying the words of saintly people, the spiritual master, and the Shastra. The actual center is the Shastra, the revealed scripture. If a spiritual master does not speak according to the revealed scripture, he is not to be accepted. Similarly, If a saintly person does not speak according to the Shastra, he is not a saintly person. The Shastra is the center for all. As we can see from these statements, not only is Shastra the center, but the statements of the Guru and other Acharyas are secondary to Shastra, not primary. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada says in his purport to Bhagavad Gita 17:15 that one should at once quote Shastra to back up what he is saying. The fact is that this is the standard way of speaking in classes, and it is quoting the Shastra. That's how we've been doing it in ISKCON since the very beginning. Srila Prabhupada in his own books follows this standard as well. Yes, he sometimes quotes his Guru, Srila Saraswati Thakur, because he is also an authority as per these verses from Manu and Yajnavalkya. But by far, Srila Prabhupada has quoted Shastra far more than any other source. So, the SAC's overarching principle of Srila Prabhupada first is unacceptable, not only because the Shastras say that the Shastras are first, but Srila Prabhupada himself also says that the Shastra is the first, that Shastra is the center, that the Shastra is the primary evidence, not Guru, not Sadhu. Hare Krishna.